All right. Want to thank you all for coming. My name is Eric Smith. I am on the OPSIG board. I'm also the editor of the Dispatcher's Office publication, and I'm also the owner of OperatingSessions.com. OperatingSessions.com is not in any way officially affiliated with OPSIG, except for the fact that I'm doing both of them. But there is no ownership interest by OPSIG in this site. There is no OPSIG requirement to use OperatingSessions.com. They are completely separate. So this is what we're going to be talking about. A little bit of a history of the site, kind of where it came from. We'll talk about what it can do today. Some of the things I've learned along the way running this site, what I'm planning to do with it in the future, and then some room for Q&A and how-tos at the end. We'll also do a demo in the middle. So, history of the site. I have always liked doing operating events. It gets easier and easier every year. Sometimes the events there are a lot of, let's say, private events. There are events where you have to go through, well, somebody has this many seats, and you might be able to get somebody to give you a seat. It's very controlled access. And one of the things that I was thinking is that, there's probably a lot of operators out there, and there's railroads out there, and we need to get the two together. And so, but that's not how it started. We have an event here in Indiana called CIROPS, Central Indiana Railroad Operations. It's been around for quite a while. I took over managing it a few years ago. And part of the work in doing one of these events is you have to generate itineraries for everybody. That can be it's a lot of manual work, and being a programmer and database developer, I'm lazy. And if I can code something to save myself some time, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And so what I did is I came up with a very simple registration database that I could put up in a web page and send out links to the people who are participating in the event with their itineraries. Showing, okay, here's the address that you need to go to. Very simple, very simplistic. And that worked fine. It did what it needed to, saved me some work. And we used the same thing for the Southeast Michigan Ops event in 2019. This had its own public website where you could go out, see the railroads that were going to be part of the event, and there was a place to click to register for the event. And that registration was done on the very early version of OperatingSessions.com. Somewhere along the line, while I was building the interface for this, we had the infamous brainstorm of, with just a minor bit of tweaking, this site could be something much bigger, where it wasn't just something that I would customize, for each event, because there are 4 events here in the region that I work with, or that I coordinate with other people. Gary Evans is on from Three Rivers Ops. I handle Central Indiana. John DePaul, who has the legendary EJ&E Railroad up in Detroit, was handling that area. And a fellow named Rick Stern down in Ohio, down near Cincinnati, handles a group called Swoops. And we all just kind of rotate between the 4 of us, between the 4 events. And like I said, somewhere along the line, it's like, this could be much bigger. And after brain dumping onto pages and pages of note pages during one of these events, came up with the idea for OperatingSessions.com and created this public interface to let people create their own events, register events, find events near them, and things kind of took off from there. the first events that weren't ones that I created started popping up in 2019, and it kind of took off from there. Um, just a couple quick things. Now, remember that basically from mid 20 or call it mid 2020 through, well, let's call it 2022, we had that little worldwide pandemic. However, it didn't seem to stop people from operating. So as you can see, these were the number of events scheduled during the year. And you can see the number of railroads that were created and a running total, as well as the number of users each year and the running total. This is with no marketing budget. So I was shocked to see how quickly it had grown and how many people were using it and what people were using it for. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's definitely, it's continuing to grow, and I don't have the money to market it. So it has been used for the last two national conventions, which was also kind of a surprise to me that they decided to use that, but it's worked out fairly well for those events. Now, as we said at the beginning, there are some things it's good for, there are some things it's not good for. And there are always people who are like, well, I don't want to use it because I'm perfectly aware of that. So let me talk through the good things about it. It is fairly simple to register. At one point, people were complaining that, oh, well, you have to give your address, you have to do this. It's like, well, the address is in there so that we can figure out where you're at, so we can figure out distances. And we'll show that in a little bit. It also helps cut down the number of junk registrations. There are some bits of information in there that are optional. There are lots of bits that are optional, such as medical problems. But since I'm a part-time paramedic and I have had to treat patients during an operating session before, it seemed like it might be a good idea if you wanted to let the host know that, hey, I've got this problem. It's really up to you. It does support both what I call a single session event, meaning I'm having an operating session on my railroad, one date, one time, all the way up to a national convention where you have, dozens of operating sessions across multiple days with limits on how many sessions you can sign up for. It does all of that. There's also a network effect, meaning if I'm using this for registration and I ask you to go sign up to register for my session, well, then you're signed up you're in the system, and then you get the benefit of all of the other sessions that are being held. Then you might start using it yourself. And that's kind of how the system has grown. And obviously it's worked pretty well over the past few years. There are some things it's not designed for. A number of the larger regional events, you submit your preferences for which sessions you want to go to. You don't get to choose, well, I want to go to, John's layout here, and I want to go to this one, I want to go to that one. You get to submit your preferences, and then the organizers decide what you get to do. Now, they'll take your preferences into account, but they force the balancing of who can do what. OperatingSessions.com at the moment is exclusively first come, first served, which it's a way to do it. It's very quick, lets people sign up for the session they want. However, that does keep some of the people and some of the larger events from using the system. There are another thing that it falls short in is the idea that I'm going to host an event, and by putting it up on the system, essentially I'm allowing anybody who's registered in the system to sign up for the event and get my information, or get the information as to where the session is. Now, that has caused some concerns, and we do have a very simple way to put a password on the event, and then the person setting up the event can simply say, well, you need to contact me first for the password. This is something that's going to be changed in the future. We'll talk about that. We also have the idea that if you're let's say you're doing um, a larger event where you've got, say, maybe 8 or 9 railroads that are having events, but the railroad owners don't want to go through the effort of setting up their railroad, adding photos, and you have the event coordinator who's having to do that. The system does support it. It's just not terribly clear how to do it. One of the other problems is that there are, let's say, dead zones for a lot of the people who don't get to see events in their area. We'll talk about this when we go to the demo. Around me, all of the railroads are using it, but that's because they know me. There are other places that have started using it because of either their experience with the national convention or, word of mouth and so on. But for a lot of people, they don't get any sessions in their area. And so we've got this chicken and the egg problem of, well, I don't want to sign up because there aren't any events, but there aren't any events because nobody's using it. And so we need to try to get over that hurdle, try to make it easier to use. And the last thing right now is that the current technology that's the site is written in needs to be upgraded and replaced. It's older technology and needs to be redone. So what it can do is pretty extensive, and we'll go through the demo of this here shortly. As much as possible, it's self-service. I don't want to be in the way of people maintaining their railroads or uploading photos or uploading files or changing the description or changing their passwords. I don't want to be in the way of that. So I've done as much of that as self-service as possible. Creating events is very simple. Now, the complex events with multiple days, multiple sessions, that's a little bit complicated. That's something that's going to be hopefully reworked in the new site or the redesign, just to make it more clear that there's a structure to the system. The railroad directory is actually incredibly popular, even with people who aren't setting up operating sessions. They're still using it to publicize their railroads, which is great. It does support, a whole bunch of different fields that are common, along with the fact that you can add as many photos as you want. You can add attachments like PDFs. So if you want to give people instructions on how your railroad works, you can upload them to the site and then just direct people to the railroad directory to download it. One of the things early on we found we needed was I wanted to get feedback on how did the session go. Did you have a good time? Did the railroad run well? Were there glitches in the system? Were the hosts rude? Were they, did you have helpers who were being bossy or not being helpful? And so that's been a very valuable thing for both the event planners and the railroad owners to get that, and the feedback can be anonymous. So if you say, and I actually had to do this one time at there was an event where there were cat smells, and it was just painfully filthy. And I have a bad allergy to cats and mold and things like that. Took 2 steps in the house and had to leave because it was so bad. And I actually had to send that as feedback to the event owner to say, hey, look, you need to talk to this guy about the cat smell. And they did. So we talked about the idea of geocoding. So there's a fairly simple way that you can put in an address and get a fairly good coordinates for that address through a service that Microsoft Azure offers. Well, if you do 2 sets of coordinates and use a little bit of math, you can figure out a rough distance between the 2 places. And so we use that for figuring out, if I want to say I want to hear about events within X miles of my home, we can do that pretty closely. Everything goes out in a weekly dispatch that's customized for each person. Each person has the option to sign up for it or not. All of this runs through commercially hosted web and email services, so they are we have generally pretty good uptime. We have good backups of everything. There's an automatic backup of all the photos, the files, databases, all of that. So we've had very little downtime for the entire life of the site. So, all right, with that said, I'll switch to the demo here. All right, so this is operatingsessions.com. Now this is me. I'm going to go ahead and log out. So we'll see how it looks for a non-logged in user. A lot of this stuff right now is public. We have three types of users in the system. We have operators, people who don't have railroads. We have layout owners, and we have organizations. Now, a user, everybody has to register as a user to use the system. Once you're a user, you can create any number of railroads. Most people have one, but in some cases, we have people managing multiple railroads. An organization, as we say, it can be as simple as a round robin group, or it can be a national convention. It's sort of the idea that we're going to combine a certain number of railroads for some event, whether it's a short-term thing or whether it's a long-term thing. We have an organization for CIROPS. All the railroads that participate in our events are in that. Each one of the other regions around here have their own organizations set up. We'll talk through that. The upcoming events page right now, somebody is saying, I'd like to see what events are there. This is something, let's call this a good problem to have. This used to be a couple of events, so it was very easy to see what was near you. At this point, we've got, what do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We've got a lot more states represented than we used to. And yes, having a filtered list of events will be coming. Similar to how we have here in the layout directory. Now, right now, this one will show all layouts. If I log in, I can filter by distance because I need to know. So like here within 25 miles of me, these are the railroads. And I can bump that out, 50, or you can just say all distances. So we do have that if you're logged in so that we know what your address is. You can also mark layouts to subscribe to so that you're sure to always get that particular layout's events, even if it's outside your preferred distance. You can filter by state. You can filter by if it's one of the organizations. So we can say, well, show me all the CIROPS layouts. I only want to see HO. I only want to see clubs. So here are all the clubs. So we got a whole bunch of different filters in here. But when you pull up one of the railroads, the first thing you notice is that this is a layout owned by a friend of mine named John Perret down south of Indianapolis. The name is actually English. It's generally the owner's last name. For more common names, you're going to have a digit after that to make it unique. But this is an address that you can give out to say, hey, you can see more about my railroad at this address. I think, yeah. So I just see Andy Keeney there in the group /Keeney. You can get to his railroad here. But we do a lot of different things. You can enter in a big description here. You can add here, we have a PDF that John has supplied with, very nicely formatted description of the layout. He's also got a document with his operating session jobs. Pretty much whatever you want to do there. You have a little photo gallery there, all the photos that he's uploaded. Gives you, what we found is that the more photos you have, the better your layout's going to sell when it comes to filling up session slots. If you don't have any photos, nobody's going to sign up for it. Down in the details, a lot of these are sort of pre-built categories, so that you can put in the common bits of information, how big is the layout, how long is the main line, what era, do you have a plywood Pacific, or are you fairly well along in your scenery? We did add on a health and safety section for the people who are, obviously this is not quite as big of a deal as it used to be, but requiring masks or vaccinations. And if you come in here, let me bring up my railroad. You can see all of the information you can put in. I have a dog. How big should the crew be? What's your dispatching system? What's your car forwarding system? Do you have social links? Do you have YouTube channels? And should this be public? Because you can have event railroads that are set up that people don't want to publicize for whatever reason. So that's the layout directory. Upcoming events. We have a mix of events in the system at the moment. So we'll pull up another neighbor's session here. This is Dan Heinel's layout. He hosts regular sessions over at his very large railroad. And in this was today's session, so it's not available for registration. Let's find another one here. So here's Trevor Jones. He has a British N-gauge railroad down in Bloomington. This is a very simple registration because it's a single session. So I've already created my profile in the system. I can just say, click once, I'm registered, done. If it's not available, it doesn't show as available. So it's a very simple, you say he can accommodate 4 or 5 operators. Once you hit 5, you're done, you're closed. So that's a simple one. There are more complicated ones out here. So this is the Three Rivers Ops event coming up. As you can tell, this has sessions over 5 different days. And across those days, there are multiple time slots. This is the complexity that you can support. Obviously, we had the national. National was similar, right? You had 7 or 8 days of events at different times. The basic idea of the time slot is, in this case, if I were to register for this, now right now I can't because it's not open. However, it will basically restrict me to one of those events, one of those sessions within the time slot. So I can sign up for this one. I can sign up for one of these 3, one of these 3, one of these 2, and then one event on Sunday. Now these have some different start times and end times. That's just sort of an override that the system supports. Each one of them will take you, clicking the link will take you to see the layout. And this is Alan Bell's New York Central up in Fort Wayne. Very nice layout. I've been on that. It's been quite a while back, but so that kind of lets you see what's coming up, so you can kind of plan that out. Now this one, they are doing the registration through the system, and it doesn't open until the 15th of next month. There are other events, and this is one of those lessons learned. They are using the system here to advertise their event. In this case, the registration is only done at SoundRail, which is fine. You know, we're getting the news out to lots of people. There's absolutely no problem doing this. It wasn't how it was designed, but that's one of the things I've learned. People will figure out different ways to use the system that I hadn't originally intended. Now, in the future, this will be something that will be supported. Again, the idea of having more people publicize their events, the more we can do to help publicize these events, the better. So let's see. This is another one. This one here, they're requiring an authorization code to register. I think, yeah, they are basically asking you to do, they have their own registration form. They're just using us for publicity. And also, the other nice thing about the operating-sessions.com is the fact that it will show you the railroads that are available without them having to build an entire duplicate system. So, all right. And I'll get to the question. I'll do the questions when we get to the end. So, as far as events go, now my view is a little bit different because I get to see everything, but creating events is actually fairly simple. So if we're creating a single session event, which is what most people do, in my case, this is going to default to my railroad, the North Star subdivision. If you have your own railroad, or if you have multiple ones that you manage, those will all be listed here. Each event is given a unique code. If you've ever flown an airplane, they give you a 6-character code that's your reservation ID. The nice thing about this is you can publicize this link. It's short. People can come straight to it and register for the event. We do that. That way you can do some of your own marketing and shoot people straight to the event without having to have them hunt for it. You put in the event name. All right, we know it's at this railroad. We don't have to type in North Star Subdivision operating session. You can put in a little description. It supports some formatting and things like that. Date, start time, end time, and how many people will you allow. You can also put a code on it to say, and typically if you're going to put a code, you're going to put some text in the description to say, hey, you need to contact me to get the registration code. In the future, we'll talk about that, as the idea that if I've operated on somebody's railroad before, they'll have the option to say, let people who have been here before register without approval. Event feedback. Some people want the feedback, some people don't. So this is a simple checkbox to turn that on and off. And that's how you create a single session event. It's very, it's 4 or 5 boxes, very simple to do. Now, a standard event gets a lot more complicated simply because there are a number of options here that I built early on that ended up not being terribly useful. Like Is this restricted to NMRA members? Do you allow early registration for NMRA? Same thing for OPSIG. This was actually because of some early events that we ran through the system. They did have these rules. What we found is that one, we don't have a current list of NMRA members. Therefore, it's sort of up to the person to self-identify as an NMRA member. It's far simpler, as they found with the Texas convention. They simply give out the code to the people they want to register. And that sort of locks people out until they're ready for that group. So they can let the NMRA people register first, or the OPSIG members first, or whatever system you have. We also added in the ability to say, while there's an inherent built-in limit to say you can sign up for one session per time slot, we also had to limit how many registrations you can sign up for across the entire event, simply because there weren't enough, right? There's, however many available sessions at the national, we couldn't support everybody if they wanted to go to every session every day. And so we allowed them to put in a limit until they got most people through. Then they said, okay, here are the holes that we have, and then they can sort of add in extra sessions after the fact. All right. So then once you've got, and I'm going to pick on Gary here a little bit. Gary's event is a standard event. This is the more complicated of the two. And so you can see when we look at a time slot, we have 5 time slots defined. Thursday, Friday, 2 on Saturday, 1 on Sunday. And then once you've got the time slots, then you define the sessions. Now, a session is a railroad within a particular time slot. And if you notice, it's how many people can you support? Do you have a slightly different start time or a slightly different end time? So again, the hard part with all of these events is always to build the matrix, right? To know, okay, how many people can you support? Like this one can support 12 people. This one can do 14, 8 here, 7 here. Okay. Well, now you've got basically 29 slots on Friday. Do you have roughly 29? So you've got 29 slots on Saturday, 29, not quite 29 here. There's always that process of creating arranging the sessions. And that's a whole nother topic of planning out a regional event, of creating that matrix of railroads. How many people can they support? Where are they located? Because you've got to figure out driving time and so on. But as I said, once you've got the time slots defined, you go through and you create your sessions. And at some point, you basically turn that down at the very bottom. There's a box. Well, his is already enabled. Is essentially say, all right, I'm ready for the public to see this. And that makes that event public within the calendar. So, organization, like I said, there's a whole bunch of different organizations here, some of which are still current, some of which are not. For instance, the Texas Express NMRA National OPSIG had 25 different railroads in it. A railroad can be in any number of organizations. They can overlap, they might not overlap. We did an organization for Indy Junction, or for CIROPS. We have 18 railroads here that have participated at one time or another. Actually, he moved, so I better take him out. One of the railroads actually closed up, so we've taken him out of the system. And as more railroads come on or people leave or move, you can update that anytime. But the idea is that for that you need to have an organization in order to do a standard event across multiple time slots. That's just how the system works. A few other things that the system does support is there's um, a lot of things are self-registered. There's the events I've signed up for. I can edit my profile. This is my profile information. Um, we talked about, somebody asked, I want to see what events are nearby. That's actually part of the event notification system. You can say, do I want to get weekly events? Do I want to get, or the weekly update? Do I want to get the organization events that are really not geographically located? And then you can set how many miles. Like during a weekday, I'm not driving 6 hours to go to a session. I might drive an hour. So maybe you set 50 miles. And then on the weekend, maybe I'd say it's 100. But that way you can set this to a reasonable distance. Now, in my case, I want to see everything that's going out of the system because, well, it's my system. So I say all. And it's always interesting to see what all's going on. So, let's see. And like I said, there's a few of these bits of information that are optional. They are provided to the layout owner if you sign up for an event. Some of these features are for me, but all right, let me stop this. And switch back. All right. As I said, there's been some lessons I've learned along the way. Um, I was always pleasantly surprised, when people started using it without me prompting them. Right. Some of my friends would use it, some of the local railroads, but then all of a sudden, people all over the place started using it, and I hadn't even advertised it. Um, People were coming up with the ways to use it for publicizing their own events, which is great. Some of the things, like I said, they ended up being yet less useful. The NMRA membership flag, I don't think anybody's used that since. The OPSIG flag, nobody ever used that. The password ended up being a lot more useful than what I originally anticipated, mostly because my original concept was I want to push for open events. You know, if there's space and I want to sign up, I can sign up. I don't want to go through a coordinator. I don't want to have to, all of these things that, to basically keep me from getting to operate. The system was designed with a fundamental, it's called a fundamental dislike of that. However, um, there are reasons that events have done that, and they're unfortunate. As I was having some chats with some of these event organizers, they're like, we got people in who destroyed people's equipment. And so we essentially went to a no trust model where you had to basically be vetted by that regional coordinator to get to attend an event. With personal railroads, there's definitely a need to have a different model for registration. And that's something that's held back the site from getting more people to host sessions through it. It did grow a lot larger in terms of user count than I ever expected. I don't know how many operators there are out there. I know how many people are in OPSIG, and it's less than how many people are doing operations. But a few of the things that we're planning for the future, as I said, part of it is a site rewrite. There's a lot of things in here. It's just that they're clunky. Being able to create a group, I'm going to operate, or I'm carpooling with two other people. That system is clunky, and we've had people miss sessions because they didn't read the instructions. As a result, the instructions were too complicated. People didn't quite get it. So that's something that needs to be rewritten. I need to bring it into a newer technology that will support um, uh, more development work going forward. Event creation, especially now, a single event, single session is very quick to do. However, there are things we could do to make it easier, like scheduling an event, the second Tuesday of the month, which should just automatically reoccur. Show the next two in advance, right? I want to show or only show one at a time. The idea of the event to the time slot to the session and being able to see it in a more streamlined fashion. Should be able to see the entire tree, and I simply couldn't do that with the technology stack I've got in there. So you can you'll be able to see the entire event matrix instead of having to drill in and have to keep a spreadsheet in addition. The big thing is the more event registration models. Open sessions where anybody can sign up, a closed session where you maintain a list of, here are the people that can sign up for my list. People, you put in your email list into the system as my crew. These are the people who can sign up. Only they will see your session. And also the idea, let's call it knock knock. There's a session out there. I've never been to, let's say, Andy's Railroad. He's having a session. He doesn't want to just let in anybody off the street. So he says, okay, you can request an invitation. And so I basically go find his event. It says I can request an invitation. I fill out a brief form with, my information the system already has. And maybe it might ask me a question about what's my experience doing operations? What's my experience doing, whatever. That invitation request is sent to Andy, and he gets my contact information. He can choose whether or not to give me an invitation. Maybe he wants to call me first, make sure I'm not a psycho. The other thing it can show is, oh, well, I've been on operating-sessions.com since this date. I have operated this many sessions at this many railroads. Think of it kind of like a reputation, or on eBay where you get the little stars. The more orders you make, the higher your reputation goes up. Just to say, I'm not a brand new person. Something else it needs to support is better support for the large events. The national convention, as I said, that the use of the system for that was a surprise to me. And there are things that it needs to do better for those big events. Better reporting, maybe interaction with registration systems. Supposedly NMRA has got a tie with, or are doing a contract with Event Squid. There might be a way to integrate the two. We don't know. The system needs to be able to support several different things during the most large events. Will have additional things going on. Let's say maybe we have operating sessions in the morning and the afternoon, and then we have open houses at night. We need to be able to list those activities as part of the itinerary, activities that are shown to everybody. You do your registration at the hotel between 3 and 5. Well, you don't have to sign up for it. It's just an activity being held. For also being able to say, look, I'm listing my event in operating-sessions.com. This is publicity only. I just want to advertise it. Okay, well, that makes it simple. You don't have to put in all the information. Just put in a date and a URL and a description, and we'll still publicize the event for you. Mobile support. Again, this is a little bit different market because it does tend to be people who are, let's say, less technology savvy than many. Now, obviously, you're all on the Zoom call. I'm not talking about you, but I frequently have to walk people through how to reset their password, because there's a couple steps. I'm trying to keep information secure. So mobile support may take the form of a better mobile web page. It may go the route of a mobile app. but I don't know if we'll probably do that at this point. So I have a list of things to do that's a mile long for this site. It keeps getting longer. Obviously, with COVID, I was very busy uh, working at the hospital during COVID as a part-time paramedic while everybody else was working on their layouts. But the thing kept, people kept signing up for events the whole time. And like I said, at this point, the goal is to get onto a new technology stack and start implementing some of these new features. So with that said, let me stop the share. And there's a few questions here. Can a crew search operators to help build or fill out a crew? Not at the moment. What I've seen in some cases is in the event description, it will say, hey, if you'd like to learn how to be a dispatcher, please contact me. There are some of those sorts of things, but as far as looking at somebody's skills, I don't currently have that. That's actually an interesting way to think about it. I'll have to think about adding that to my list. For the site upgrade is most definitely a time constraint, not a money thing. I have my own server to put it in. I've built all the software myself, so that's not really an issue. Let's see. Can you restrict signups for certain positions, e.g., yardmaster or dispatcher, to a pre-approved list? I do have the idea at some point of maybe adding the jobs people can sign up for. I think if you only want to allow this person or that person to do the job, that probably is something that you would keep outside the system. I'm not sure. Where you say, okay, I'm attending your session, but I can't be the dispatcher. At the moment, right now, you just sign up to attend. The job is not currently something that's supported, but there is the idea of in the future possibly doing that. There may be people who want to sign up for this particular yard or that particular yard. There's also the idea of seniority, which can go back and forth. I've seen it where, once somebody has seniority, they don't ever leave the job and nobody else gets to do it. A lot of the things are what I have to get over is, well, I don't think that's a good idea, so I'm not going to implement it. That's the wrong approach. There are things that I may implement in the system that maybe I never intend to use, but other people want to use it. So, let's see. Good mobile presentation. Yeah, I understand that. Younger people, we have to get younger people to be welcome at operating sessions, first of all. We have to make sure that the operating session hosts are willing to have new people come and play. If you don't have that, then you've got a bigger problem. Let's see, weekly sessions. Do I need to each week? I'm assuming, do I need to sign up each week? At the moment, yes, because each event is independent. There is no linkage between them. Let's say for an owner, is there an opportunity to have a wait list, or for registrant cancels to bring on the next? Yeah, that's something that's on my list to do in the future. The idea of a wait list. The trick with the wait list would be that if the wait list opens up, the person would have to respond within a certain amount of time, or it would go to the next person in the list automatically. Temporary addresses for when you travel. There's no reason you can't change your profile. You can just edit your profile address and change it. Let's see. Filter events. Yeah, filtering events to X event. Would be nice to be able to filter upcoming events to X distance from my location. You can do that within the email, so it doesn't send you emails about things you can't go to. The organization events, and let me just show you real quick. This is the weekly dispatch. This comes out Sunday mornings. And what it does is it shows, okay, these are the things that are coming up. Organization events are not keyed to geography. So if you have opted in for organization events, you get all of them. So at this point, we've got St. Louis has an operating group, RPM is doing an event, Lakeshore is doing an event, Three Rivers Up, Sound Rail, there's a lot of them. Now, once you get past that, upcoming railroad events, these are the ones that are based on the distance. Now, in this case, I've got the distance set to unlimited, so I get everybody's, and it just shows me, okay, here's what's coming up. Like there's one up at Gary's here. There's a number of them local. There's one in South Carolina. Obviously, I'm not going to the one in South Carolina, but I want to see what's going out. So this is the weekly dispatch that we talked about. And that's just part of the service. Let me see if there's more questions. Let's see. Yeah, Dwight, use achievement badges or reputation. That is something that I actually brought that up during I think we called it the user council back a while ago, and people took it very incorrectly. It was more the idea that, not so much a plus or minus, but just to show, hey, I have operated on this many railroads for this many sessions, just sort of a counter. The idea of being able to have the owner thumbs up or thumbs down the person was also something we talked about, kind of like the feedback system, to say, yes, this person was good and got a good rating. It's more to pick out the bad apples. We've had a few people even locally that we've had to uninvite from future events because of their attitude towards everybody. So the idea of getting a thumbs down from a railroad owner would trigger we need to find out what's going on, because we need to filter the bad operators out of the system. Was it just a personality conflict, or was it, yeah, they broke my engine, left without any apology, some of those sort of things that will not get you invited back. Let's see. Yeah, owners willing to invite a new guy. I think that's something that would be probably something that would be good as a part of the description of the railroad, to say new operators welcome. We'll teach you. We're having a, especially if you have a particularly complicated railroad, offering a session that's for new people, or a club or something, to say, hey, we're going to have operations here at the club. If you'd like to learn how the railroad works, we're going to have a session just for new people. Kind of call it an orientation session, or come an hour early and we'll go through the whole railroad with you, so that's something that I think more people could do that, should do that. But it's obviously it's all a matter of time. So, let's see. Sorry if I missed it. Would be a way I can include a note to an owner that I've operated on his lens, so I'm not completely new. To Jeff, if you're still on right now, there's no, the knock knock feature is not there, but the idea of being able to send a note to the owner would be part of that requesting an invitation process. That's already documented. So, all right. With that said, let me, if people have other questions before we close up here, I'd be happy to take them at the moment. But otherwise, for those of you who attended, I thank you for your attendance. And but like I said, if you have other questions that I didn't cover, please unmute yourself and you can ask now.
One question, something comes to mind with the loss of Bill Neal a few weeks ago here. Leaving his layout, if his layout's on here, I'm thinking it might be, leaving his layout for people to see pictures and that, but do you have any desire to identify the layouts that maybe are no longer with us? Whether it's
Um,
somebody just torn it down and moving on type of thing, or losing the person?
that's actually a good question. Now Bill, I do see Bill's, he had the PRR panhandle.
Yes.
So basically this is one of those, let's call it a, how much of your digital presence do you want to live on, right? Do you want your, you know, girl I went to school with died a number of years ago. Her Facebook page is still up.
Yeah.
With Bill's in particular, I think that would probably be a question for, whoever is handling his estate of his railroad. Is his railroad being torn down? Um, uh, that's actually maybe something we should probably discuss offline, but I'd be happy to. It's actually a good problem. Unfortunately, the railroader community tends to be on the older side, and it's going to happen more and more often. Now, we have had some railroads that have been torn down and never to be rebuilt. Those can probably just be deleted. Um, Bills, if I mean, let me see what his
Would
look
it
like.
matter if you left them there and put them,
No,
identify them as a legacy, or is some other word we'd use to identify them as no longer being there? But it might be
I
nice
think
to
it.
see pictures.
Yeah, I think it definitely demands a feature switch to say, you know, especially for whoever was asking, do I have a way to contact the layout owner? At the moment, there isn't a way to do that, but that would be something where you're never going to get a reply because
Right.
the owner is deceased at this point. So I think that's probably worth putting on to say this is a memorial page, a legacy page. I don't know what the right terminology is, but just to say that, you know, Bill Neal passed away on such and such a date. This page remains here in his memory, something to that effect. So I think that's probably, uh, yeah, it was unfortunate to hear about Bill. He was a good guy. But that's definitely something I need to put on my list. So, but at the moment, no, it doesn't hurt anything to leave it out there. I will actually, as long as I'm thinking of it, I'll plug in a quick line. Um, so, okay. Any other questions?
One other quick one. I haven't gone to the website like I probably should have. I don't know how many of my operators I get, 15 to 20 per week, and a lot, or per session. A lot of them are the same, but I've got a fair amount of them. And is there a good website or a link that I could just send out to everybody to say, if you're not involved in the OPSIG or not familiar with it, this is a good, give them the link, tell them to go and they can learn more about it, that we're heavily involved in that in operations?
Well, again, OPSIG and operating-sessions.com are two completely separate animals.
No,
So
I
if you want to,
understand. I'm just thinking, trying to get more people involved in operations, or to better understand operations.
yeah, I would send them to the Ops 101 section on OPSIG. Um, it's under the resources and link. Let me share my screen so you can see it.
And that's for guests also.
Oops, hold on. Yeah, hold on. I shared the wrong thing here. Yeah, this is open to the public. The operations 101 page. It's just resources/ops 101. Just have them go to resources and links, operations 101.
Okay.
That's a good description. There's the video that I did sort of an introduction to operations on the YouTube channel. There's lots of good stuff there. But yeah, all of this is public. All the resources and links are public.
Okay, good.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, like I said, I want to thank you all. Oh, somebody asking?
Oh, no, just thank you very.
Oh, okay. I got your light right in my your headlamp right in my head there, Rick.
Okay, no problem.
Want to thank everybody for attending. We're going to stop the recording.